Have you ever glanced at your reflection and wondered, what if it wasn't really you staring back? What if, for just a moment, the reflection had a life of its own? Claire didn't believe in such things either, until the night her reflection did something that shouldn't be possible. What you're about to hear is the terrifying story of the reflection, a tale that will make you question what you see in the mirror. But be warned, you might never look at your reflection the same way again. It started on a Friday. Claire had just come home from a long day at work. It was late, nearly midnight. The rain outside pounded against the windows as she entered her apartment. Shaking off her wet coat, she flicked on the lights, casting a dim glow over the small space, and immediately noticed something was wrong. The mirror in the hallway, it wasn't where it should be. Claire always kept it centered on the wall, but now it hung slightly askew. She frowned. She lived alone, so there was no one else who could have moved it. With a sigh, she adjusted the mirror, straightening it before heading to the bathroom to wash up. But as she left the room, she could have sworn, just for a second, that the reflection didn't move with her. Shrugging off the creeping unease, Claire brushed her teeth, washed her face, and went to bed, convincing herself it was just her imagination. The rain continued to beat against the window, and soon, rhythmic sound lulled her to sleep. 3 a.m., she woke with a start. The apartment was silent now, unnaturally so. Her eyes darted around the darkened room, her heart pounding. Something had woken her, but she didn't know what. And then she heard it, a soft, scraping noise coming from the hallway. Slowly, cautiously, Claire slipped out of bed, the wooden floorboards creaking beneath her feet as she made her way to the door. The hallway was dim, but she could make out the silhouette of the mirror at the far end. She stared at it, holding her breath, waiting. Nothing moved. The mirror was perfectly still, reflecting the faint outline of her apartment behind her. She let out a shaky breath, convinced it had been her imagination. But just as she turned to go back to bed, something caught her eye. In the reflection, there was something off. Claire's reflection was standing just a little too far to the left. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, trying to clear her vision. But it didn't change. The reflection was definitely standing a few inches off from where she was, not matching her movements. Cold chill ran down her spine. Without thinking, she stepped closer to the mirror, heart racing, eyes wide. She raised her hand slowly, and the reflection followed, delayed by just a fraction of a second. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She waved her hand, trying to test it again. The reflection mimicked her, but then its mouth curled into a smile. Claire's own lips stayed perfectly still. Her heart pounded in her chest, her skin prickling with fear. She stepped back, but the reflection didn't. It stayed there, frozen in place, its eerie grin widening. And then, before her very eyes, it raised its hand and waved, slowly, deliberately. Claire stumbled backward, knocking over a chair as she rushed to the bedroom, slamming the door shut behind her. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she pressed her back against the door, trying to calm down. Couldn't be real, she thought. It had to be some kind of hallucination, a trick of the light, something, anything but what it seemed to be. But deep down, she knew. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. For hours, she stayed in the bedroom, listening, waiting. But the apartment remained silent. No more footsteps, no more scraping. Eventually, exhaustion overtook her, and she drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, the apartment was quiet, filled with the soft glow of the early sun. Claire tried to shake off the events of the night before, telling herself it was just a nightmare. She had imagined the whole thing, but when she walked into the hallway, her blood froze. The mirror was gone. There was no sign it had ever been there. The nails that had held it up were missing. The wall was smooth, as if the mirror had never existed. Her heart raced as she frantically searched the apartment, but it was nowhere to be found. The mirror and the reflection inside it had vanished. Claire's hands trembled as she stood in the empty hallway. What was happening? She couldn't explain it. She grabbed her phone, about to call someone, anyone, when a sound stopped her cold. It was a voice, a soft, familiar voice, coming from behind her. Slowly, Claire turned and her eyes widened in horror. There, standing in the middle of the hallway, was her reflection. Not in the mirror, no, it was standing in front of her, smiling that same twisted smile. Claire's blood ran cold as she took a step back, her heart thundering in her chest. The reflection didn't move, just stood there, its smile widening, its eyes glinting with malice. And then it whispered in a voice that sounded like her own. But wrong, twisted, inhuman, you're not real. Before she could scream, the reflection lunged at her. Claire's heart stopped as the reflection lunged, except it didn't touch her. It just stood there, grinning as Claire fell backward, gasping for air. But when she looked down, she wasn't on the floor. She was standing in the mirror. Her breath hitched as she pounded on the glass, staring out at her own apartment from the inside of the reflection. The creature, her double, was on the other side now, standing in her living room, looking back at her with that sickening grin. Claire screamed, but no sound came. The reflection tilted its head, waved mockingly, and walked away. Days passed, weeks. Claire remained trapped, watching helplessly as her reflection lived her life. Wore her clothes, went to her job, laughed with her friends, and no one noticed the difference. Until tonight. If you're listening to this right now, check the nearest mirror. Look closely. Are you sure it's really you on the other side? Or is something else staring back? Let me know in the comments below, because you never know when your reflection might be watching you.